All right, so next we're gonna do our Iberico or Curabuda or Berkshire pork chop Milanese. So this is one of our main course items meant for sharing. So it's obviously a very beautiful, large piece of Curabuda pork, bone in, very small bone up here, that I've pounded out with a meat tenderizer between 2 layers of plastic wrap. And now we're gonna do a simple breading procedure. So we do all-purpose flour. I like to bread the whole pork chop. Some people leave the bone. You guys can decide what you want to do at California Republic, but I always like to get brown crispiness all over the entire pork chop, including the bone. Okay, so it all starts with the flour. So you flour it really well, and then you just get rid of any excess flour just by patting it. Okay, then it goes right into the egg. So after flour, then it goes into the egg. Flip. Make sure the egg coats all the flour. You don't want to miss any pieces because then they won't adhere to the panko breadcrumbs. Okay, now I'm doing this with 2 separate hands, right? One hand is for the wet ingredients, the other hand is for the dry ingredients. So I'm taking the pork chop now and I'm putting it into the egg, which is wet. It came from flour, which was dry, into the egg that's wet, and now it's going into the seasoned panko breadcrumbs. Season them with a little panko, a little paprika, and a little dry oregano, some salt, some pepper. Absolutely delicious. So after I've placed it in there with my wet hand, I then go back to the dry hand and I toss it together. Take the breadcrumbs, make sure the breadcrumbs are adhering, which they're doing, having no problem with that. Okay. Anywhere where you see the breadcrumbs aren't thick, you can take fistfuls of or pinches of the breadcrumbs and add it to the pork chop. All right, so I think we're really well breaded at this point. What we're going to do is we're going to add our butter to the saute pan. Okay, nice tablespoon of butter. Pan's already getting nice and hot. We're going to add our olive oil. So 50% olive oil, 50% butter, and just let that melt. This dish comes together very quickly because the pork chop is pounded so thin that it cooks very, very quickly. Okay? So, at this point, your fats are almost melted. Once your butter starts to bubble, you do not want it to brown. You go right in with your pork chop. Okay. Make sure your fire is like all the way up for this one, for this part. Once you add the pork chop, just remember the temperature of the pan is going to drop dramatically. So you want to make sure you adjust for that by getting full fire on the pan. Obviously, the commercial kitchens have much faster gas, but we're doing okay here because our pan is pretty good. In this pan, you also have the choice of adding in some really good herbs. What they do is kind of flavor the fat and make sure that it's a little bit flavorful. So I add a little bit of sage. You can add thyme. You can add rosemary. It's really about what you like in the butter. Make sure after the pork goes into the pan, you're kind of swirling it around so that it gets even coloring. Let this sear for a couple minutes, and then we'll flip it to the other side and finish it for another few minutes. Nice color on our pork chop. We're gonna go ahead and flip it over. And depending on the thickness of the pork chop, you can finish it here on the stove top or slip it right into an oven. This one's a little thicker, so we're gonna go right into an oven. All right, while your pork chop is finishing cooking, you go ahead and dress your spinach and red onions with a little bit of mustard vinaigrette. Season with a little bit of salt and save that for the plate. Okay, so now the pork chop is in the oven a couple minutes. I can just feel that it's done. If you want to put a temperature reader in it, you can also do that. But it's looking absolutely delicious. Got that nice brown butter all over it. Looks fantastic. Go right to the plate, or you can put on a little rack to drain off some of the excess oil. So that goes on the plate. Okay, I'm going to plate up with our spinach salad right on the side of the Milanese. I have the big tomatoes on the vine, so in the recipe I put the small ones. So I put 3, in the recipe I put 6. And then I always like to serve Milanese with a little lemon wedge. And that is your Berkshire pork chop Milanese with spinach salad and vine roasted tomatoes. Enjoy.